the variety within those foods, there's a tremendous variety. Okay, so the original diet was a vegetarian diet. Okay, so that's what we read in the Bible. But then something happened. Man sinned, right? Man sinned, and they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and the diet changed. The diet changed after man sinned, and this is what we read in Genesis 3. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree, cursed is the ground for thy sake. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. Okay, vegetables. Vegetables were added to the diet after the fall. So the original diet included fruit and the seeds. Now, why did God add vegetables after the fall? Well, I kind of speculate that there were some protective properties within the vegetables that we were going to need now, because we were going to start degenerating. The body was going to start falling apart. We were going to start dying. And so vegetables have some healing properties. Herbal medicine, you know, I'm not an expert in that area, but I think there's some truth to that in terms of, you know, there's probably some extremes to that also. You know, but God said, I'm now adding vegetables to your diet. In mercy, God is doing that now, because He knows our diet now needs something else that it didn't have. All right? It was only after the flood, and we know this, it was only after the flood that God then gave man permission to eat meat. Well, why did He give man permission to eat meat? Well, the argument is because there was nothing else to eat. I think it's deeper than that, though. Because everything, all the vegetation was going to be destroyed, so that might be a good reason to start eating a little bit. However, if you read in Genesis 9, it's interesting, because it says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat or food for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. So in other words, if there's blood in there, don't eat it. Right? Got to get the blood out. And then verse 5 is an interesting verse. I'll get to you in a minute, Pastor. Let me talk about verse 5. And it says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it. That's an interesting verse. Let me translate it. And translation means you can eat the meat, but it's going to kill you.
It's going to pay for it.
It's going to kill you. It's going to shorten your life. You know what? God, I think, did this out of mercy. Because if you look at the lifespan of man before the flood and after the flood, there's a dramatic difference. There's a dramatic difference. If you look at, you know, Methuselah, 969 years, right? Adam lived how long? Was it 930 or something?
Yes.
930. And Noah lived, I just saw it in the Bible today, 950 years. All right? So if you look at a chart, and you look at this chart here, it's not the actual size of people, but each line here represents 100 years. Right? So you got Adam, you got Methuselah, you have Noah. They all lived over 900 years. But something dramatic happens after the flood. The lifespan drops to 600 years. I'm not sure who this character is. But the lifespan started going down. What happened? What changed? The diet changed. Okay? The diet changed. And here we are today, right? You know, if we live 100 years, we've kind of exceeded the statistics in terms of how long we live.
Yes.
So when you look at the progression or the decline of mankind, you know, maybe was it God knowing that, you know, if Mussolini or a Hitler or Saddam Hussein lived 900 years or 800 years might not be such a good thing?
Amen.
Maybe in His mercy He shortened our lifespan. You know, look, we all like to live as long as possible, right? But some days I wake up and say, man, I'm starting to feel old.
Yeah.
You know, 52, right? How old are you, Mike?
56.
Yeah, okay, you're older than me.
Yes,
you feel the aches and pains. I'm not even going to ask
bit.
Pastor and Brother Cook. I mean, we all know it, right? We know what's happening. If we live to 80 years old, we've done well. Right? Pastor, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to throw a theological and rational thing in here for you on this reason for God giving the meat. The idea that not enough vegetation doesn't hold up because your animal kingdom is dependent upon that vegetation, you know, and there weren't enough animals. You know, there weren't enough animals for all the predators just to eat flesh, you know, and so forth, and there were too many others that relied on the vegetation. You know, all the cows and the sheep and everything have to eat vegetation. And so there must have been enough vegetation when God turned them loose to sustain the life of all those animals. So really, I think the lifespan is probably the only reason that God did that, because if there was enough vegetation for the animals, there was enough vegetation for the humans, you know.
Okay, good point. Good point. I'm sure they brought some type of supplies on the ark with
Yeah,
them
that's true.
to live off of.
And another thing, God could have created rows of fruit trees and everything. So he could have done that.
Sure. Yeah, God could have provided. So, you know, you see articles from time to time in the news, you know, can this meat kill you? E. coli, mad cow disease, some of this is old news, but, it's still pertinent. Then the mad pig disease, all the hogs that they had to kill. I'm not sure where that happened, but, we see stories like this from time to time, that there's outbreaks. And this was a food inspector here, the Grand Rapids Press Sunday, this was from 1997, but no matter how sophisticated government testing of meat and poultry becomes, the sheer volume produced in America may make it impossible to detect all dangerous bacteria in food. That's what inspectors say. Okay, I don't say that. But so we know some of this stuff. They say some of the people that work in meat factories are vegetarian. And I'm not sure I want to work in that refrigeration there. That's kind of hard. All right, so in the Bible, there's actually 3 diets. Okay, so if you look at what the Bible has, the first diet is what God gave us originally, the ideal diet. All right. However, eating meat is not forbidden in the Bible. Okay, so you look, there is an acceptable diet. It may not be the best, right? But God hasn't forbidden it. Now we have a little additional light in terms of the last days and what to expect. But in terms of the way we interact with people, it's an acceptable diet. Okay. However, we don't teach people how to do it the most healthy way possible.
But you're not saying that. Go back to that. Oh, good. Okay. No problem.
So, and then there's the unacceptable or the prohibited. Okay. So there are certain things in the Bible that God says, don't eat. Right? Don't eat a vulture. Would you eat a vulture? No.
I've seen it.
Would you eat a rat?
No.
I would.
Some people told us we have it at Chinese restaurant.
So, God has kind of forbidden certain things for various reasons. And when they went on the ark, they only took 2 of those animals that they weren't going to eat. The ones that they were going to eat a little bit of, they had 7 of them. Okay? So, we know this story. And then, in terms of the book of Daniel, we know the stories in the book of Daniel. Daniel has 7 stories and 7 prophecies, with the first story in the book of Daniel in chapter 1. Okay, so the first story in Daniel is what? Well, Jesus first of all mentioned Daniel the prophet in Matthew 24. In regards to the last days, the disciples asked him, what's going to be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? That was the question that was asked of Jesus. One of the things he says in his response, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So Jesus recognized Daniel as a prophet that had something to say for the last days. When you see it, understand it. I'm not talking about the abomination of desolation tonight, but just pointing out that Jesus recognized Daniel as a prophet.
Amen.
All right? And so we look at the first story in the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 1. It's the story of Daniel and then his 3 companions, right? They came to Babylon, and the king kind of singled them out, and he wanted to give them a special diet, and then he was going to, put them in school and educate them. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat. There's probably things in there he should not eat as a Hebrew boy. Things that God said, don't eat these types of things. Nor with the wine which he drank. Now that could be fermented or unfermented. So you got to be careful even with the juice, right? Let's read on. Thereon he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Didn't want the alcohol, didn't want the unclean foods. He said, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. Give us 10 days and give us pulse to eat. Well, that's an interesting word. What is pulse?
Vegetables.
Well, if you look at it in the NIV, it has vegetables. Well, in my mind, when I picture vegetables, I think of broccoli and carrots and cauliflower. You know what? It's much broader than just vegetables. It was that original diet.
Yeah.
It was what God gave them in the Garden of Eden, the vegetable kingdom, the plant kingdom. Give us the nuts, give us the beans, give us the fruit, give us the vegetables, and see what we look like in 10 days. Give us a 10-day trial, basically is what he said. At the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh, and all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. So there's a 10-day test. And I suspect if you had marched across the desert, you might have lost a little bit of weight and probably didn't look quite the same as when you left. So after 10 days, it looks like there was some difference. You could see a difference in these Hebrew youth, and they granted them their request. Okay, so that's the first story in the book of Daniel. So as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Yes, Dave?
The largest animals in the world tend to be plant eaters.
Yeah, sure. All right, moving on. Now at the end of the days, the king had said he should bring them in. Then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And so the story is, show that last verse in there. But if you look in the last chapter in the book of Daniel, Daniel is told to close the book up, seal it till the time of the end. And then it says, many shall be purified and made white and tried. The wicked shall do wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So if you look at the stories in the book of Daniel, Daniel 2, where prayer is important in interpreting the vision of the king. Prayer is found in so many chapters in the book of Daniel, right? So those are part of the stories of Daniel, telling us how we should be living just before the coming of Jesus. So one of those has to do with diet, all right? So, and this is where I was going to put the plug in for next week, the prophecy seminar. I want to come back and hear the prophecy, but it looks like we don't have any visitors tonight. But come back next weekend for sure, because we're gonna and tomorrow night we're gonna kind of deal with diabetes. And Pastor, I don't know if we have a conflict, but I think the Sunday church uses over there on Sunday nights, don't they?
We could switch with them.
We can switch with them.
Yeah, we let them know.
All right. David brought that to my attention. But anyway, Jesus, it's interesting that Jesus says, I'm the bread of life.
Oh, yeah, over there.
He doesn't say I'm the steak of life. I'm not the chicken of life. The bread of life. If you look at the old food guide pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid had grains on it. That should be the foundation of somebody's diet. Mm-hmm. Then there were the fruits and the vegetables. And you got to the top of the pyramid, you had the animal products and the dairy products. Kind of symbolizing, you shouldn't be eating a lot of those things at the top of the pyramid, but Americans have the pyramid upside down. At the bottom they got the protein foods,
yes.
The high-fat foods. And so even looking at what science tells us how we should eat, it's supported in the Bible. Okay, so the Bible gives us a little better guide in terms of what we should be doing.
Amen.
So I gave you a little bit of whether it's sodium, cholesterol, calories. If we eat the way God suggests, less processed foods, and I tell people this all the time, that if you eat foods that you have to chew more, you're less likely to overeat. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, they don't take as much chewing, right? The mashed potatoes, the white bread, the candy cereals, the beverages, those things, processed foods tend to just go down fast. The popcorn, the microwave popcorn, the movie theater popcorn. Put it in your hand and there's just grease all over your hand. Probably got fat in movie theater popcorn for 2 days for some people. And you can go to a movie theater and easily eat 1,400 calories. Easily if you're not careful. All right. So to close this up, I just want to kind of put this up there that when we're dealing with diet, we need help.
Yes.
We need help. Because, and you know what? We're humans, and we tend to sometimes eat things that may not be the best for us. If you're like me, have I arrived? No, I haven't arrived. All right? None of us have arrived, right? But what are you doing most of the time? What are you doing 90% of the time? That's what the important thing is. What is the trend? What is your lifestyle? If you're doing the wrong thing 80% of the time in terms of diet, you're suffering.
Amen.
But if you reverse that and do, hey, you end up at the buffet once in a while, that's not a problem. That's not the issue. The issue is what are you doing day after day after day in terms of your diet. So in terms of Jesus, he's going to give us the strength. I can do all things through Christ, right? Mm-hmm. Including diet. Because Jesus has been there.
Amen.
He went to the wilderness, got tempted. So, and I know each of us have our own struggles in terms of the dietary issues. You know, whether it's the high fat, whether it's the sugary items, you know, whether it's the caffeine. We all struggle with things. So we need help. We need help from above. And I think sometimes we have a culture within the church, maybe not so much this church, but sometimes we judge. And sometimes we judge by the diet. Oh, are you a vegan? You a vegan? I heard David Asker talking about this one time. Is that vegan? Oh yeah. It's a potluck, you know. Everything's vegan, you know. Don't ask any questions, right? So, you know, sometimes we strain at a gnat and we swallow a camel. You know. You look at the overall trend of the diet, so things can be taken to extremes too. So a diet is one of those areas that people take to extremes. I see it every day. So any other questions? Yes.
Can obesity be reversed through exercise?
Yes.
Yeah, probably the question, can obesity be reversed through exercise? Probably that's more important than diet. Diet's important, but of the two, they've done studies, and they've even done studies on kids. Overweight kids and normal weight kids. The normal weight kids eat more calories than the overweight kids. The normal weight kids are active though. So just the activity becomes extremely important. I'm not saying diet's not important, but if you ask me which is more important, I think the exercise is more important. Activity is more important. And that's just a part of that whole healthy lifestyle. Exercise, yes.
Can you do this class once a year?
I can preach it at church. Want to preach it at church one day, Pastor?
Have it like once a year.